Hey Mike, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Dana.
So as you know, we're doing a series of videos to try to capture some of our company history and stuff as we celebrate our upcoming 100-year anniversary. And I wanted to get some of our longest term employees and other employees for the company on video, recording some good stories, corporate culture, and capture some of that. So I have to ask an unusual question first, because obviously I know your name, but if you can state your name and how long you've been with the company and what you do.
My name's Mike Iannucci, and I will be here 40 years come this November.
Oh, that's awesome.
Service manager, custom engineered products. So I do line shafts, hydroflows, and submersible electrics.
So how did you end up coming to be part of our company?
Well, I was born and raised in Pennsylvania, and I got out of the Marine Corps in 1983. That same year, my sister and my brother-in-law moved to Palm Bay, Florida. So they knew I was looking for a job. So he calls me on the phone one day and says, look, I drive past this place all the time. It's called Couch Pump Company. Why don't you send them a resume? So I did. A couple of weeks later, a guy named Richard Swally calls me on the phone. He says, hey, Mike, can you come down and talk to us? I said, yeah, my sister just moved to Palm Bay, so I can come visit her, and then I'll come talk to you. So we set everything up. And I get to Florida, get to my sister's house, and my brother-in-law says, let's go take a ride and look at the place. So we go driving down US 1 in Grant, and we see the sign Couch Pump Company. So we pulled over on the side of the road, and he says, well, that must be it over there. I'm like, where? He says, that building right there. I mean, you mean that building with the paint peeling off the wall and all the broken windows? I said, that can't be the building, because that's an abandoned building. So he says, well, let's see. So we kind of went driving in the driveway. We pulled up to the office, and sure enough, there were cars there and people walking around. And so we kind of did a U-turn and just pulled right back out of there. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to move 1,500 miles to work in some place that looks like the aftermath of the Alamo.
Oh, wow. Sounds like they had some cleanup they needed to do. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to realize this is like October of 1985.
Okay. Yeah, just shortly after we closed on.
Right. So my brother-in-law says, well, look, you came all the way down here. Go talk to the guy tomorrow. So I thought, all right, fine. So I go in there, and as I'm talking to Richard, he tells me, well, we don't want you to work here. We want you to work in Deerfield, because that's where we build our hydraulic-driven pumps. And with your background in the Marine Corps, I was an aircraft hydraulic technician. He says, we thought you'd be a good fit for that. So I'm like, oh, okay. He says, would you mind going down there? And I'm like, well, how far is it? He said, it's about 120 miles or so. He said, but don't worry, we're going to fly down. I said, fly? He says, yeah, we have a company plane. I'll fly you down there. So now I'm kind of feeling like a big shot. We get in the plane, and we got to the airport, we get in the plane, and that's where I also met Crazy Greg Johnson for the first time. And the reason I call him Crazy Greg Johnson is because a couple of years later, Ed Sarasis and I were headed back up to Grant to look at a machine. I can't remember exactly what we were doing up there. But as we're flying back to Deerfield, because Greg used to be in the Marine Corps too, so we start talking. And he says, have you ever flown a plane? I said, no. He pulls the yoke out and swings it over in front of me. He says, you better grab a hold of that. Ed's in the back. He starts freaking out. And I grab a hold of the yoke, and the plane starts to go into a little bit of a nosedive. He says, you're going to crash us if you don't pull up. And I'm like, Greg, will you please take this thing back? Ed's in the back seat. Greg, take the wheel back. Take the wheel back. He says, now you're coming up too high. You're going to stall. He says, will you please take this thing back? So he laughed, and he finally took it back. But anyway, that's why I call him Crazy Greg Johnson. So we get down to Deerfield, and he shows me around. We talked, and he made me an offer, and I accepted it. 30 days later, I went back to Pennsylvania, packed everything in the back of my pickup truck, and moved to Florida.
Well, I'm glad we made a good enough impression somehow throughout all that.
It's kind of a funny story.
That is a very funny story. I appreciate you sharing that. Some of these questions, let's see. Over the years, how have you seen MWI Pumps evolve and adapt to changing times, or any significant milestones you've witnessed?
Yeah, well, I would have to say in the area of engineering, because back in the day when I was still out on the shop floor working with Jose Robinson, who that guy taught me everything I know about hydroflows. Back then, we had one manufacturing engineer, and he would come out of the office with a piece of paper and a hand sketch on it about how he wanted something put together, and that's all we had to go by. No dimensions, no nothing, just this hand sketch. So Jose and I'd be working, and there'd be a question, and he would send me back in there with a piece of paper, and I'd walk up to the guy and say, "Hey, we don't understand what this means on your print here." So he would take a pencil and scratch it out, put a couple of more squiggly lines in, and then I'm like, what is this? This is worse than the first one. He said, "Look, just go out there, you and Jose, put the thing together. When it's together, I'll come out there and look at it, and I'll let you know if I like it or not." So I'd go back out there and tell Jose all that, and he'd get mad at me. I said, "Well, you go in there and talk to him." But anyway, when you look at engineering now, how everything's on a print and there's a plan for everything, and that for me is the biggest thing, how we actually used to put those pumps together with basically a hand sketch on the back of a napkin, as opposed to today.
Yeah, well, the level of detail that you can do now with some of the software and the SolidWorks and drawing it before, I guess when you got to do a bunch of plumbing on it, it's easier to hand sketch it. But yeah, we've come a long ways now. Now we got the full, we can even build all those hydraulic fittings and plumbing and stuff before we even put it on the pump, knowing it's going to fit.
To me, that's the biggest thing.
So that's a big positive change. How would you describe the culture at MWI Pumps? What do you think sets us apart from other companies?
Well, I like the fact that it's a family atmosphere. Not many people know the president of the company and are on a first name basis with him. So I like that. And I definitely feel a sense of loyalty going both ways. So,
yeah, we have a lot of people that have been with us a long time, seen a lot of changes over the years. And, you know, if it wasn't for all those people, we wouldn't be where we are today. But no memorable stories that exemplifies our company's core value. Can you think of anything? You might not have thought of one before I put you on the spot.
Nope, now I'm on the spot.
Yeah. No fear. We've sent you to some pretty interesting places over the years. So how many different countries have you been to for us?
Oh, geez. I don't know. Central America, South America, all over Africa, Southeast Asia. I would have to sit down and count them.
Any of those places more memorable than others? Any that you were more difficult than others? You were in some difficult places you had to stay in, from mosquitoes to lack of water and electricity.
Yeah, I remember my first trip to Guyana. My first trip there, I stayed at this place called the Tower Hotel. I stayed there a couple of times. There was never hot water. And when I checked in, they gave me a room key. But then when I got to my room, there was no doorknob on the door. So I'm like, what's with the room key? So I went back downstairs. I said, "There's no doorknob on this door." And they said, "Well, don't worry about it. It'll be okay. It's the only room we have." I said, "Well, can you send someone up to put a doorknob on?" He says, "Well, we don't have any. We don't have any extra." So I went and I bought 2 Pepsi bottles, and I put 1 Pepsi bottle, closed the door, put 1 Pepsi bottle in front of the door. So if somebody came in, it would knock it over and wake me up. And the other Pepsi bottle was on my nightstand. That was my weapon in case someone came in.
Yeah, I guess your background for coming out of the Marines was useful for some of the places we had to send you for service and maintenance. So, significant projects and achievements. Are there any projects that stand out as a pivotal moment in the company's history that you think that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, for me, that would definitely be the 60-inch hydroflows, the original ones. I went to Chalmette, Louisiana. There were 3 of them.
First one you built?
The first ones, yep. I did startups on those, and we later sold a ton of those to the city of New Orleans. But that particular job, that was like the big deal back then, and I still think about it. And yeah, there's kind of an amusing little story with that one. We had a problem with one of the hydraulic motors, and we only had a couple of days to get it fixed because they were coming to do the parish was coming to do startup. So Tom Borderline was our rep out there, and we had a hatch on the pump. They're 45-degree angle pumps. We had a hatch on the pump. He says, "We're going to go in there. We're going to pull that motor. I'm going to bring my boom truck over here. We're going to take that old motor out, put the new one in." And I'm looking at him like, "We are, huh?" So he gets his boom truck over there. We take the hatch off. Now, this is back before anybody wore fall harnesses. There was no safety.
No confined space requirements. Yeah.
Nope. We just go crawling in there, and we're kind of crawling down the pipe, holding onto the hydraulic pipes to guide us down. And the water was low enough that we could stand on the diffuser blades. So you got to realize you're at a 45-degree angle, and the water's flat down here. It took us 3 days to get that motor changed. By the end of the third day, we're down there working, and you start to get disoriented. It seemed like the pump was horizontal, and you had this 45-degree wall of water just waiting to crash on you. So I'm working, and I'm looking at him, and I'm looking at the water, and I'm looking at Tom like, Tom, are you seeing this? He says, yeah, just forget it. Keep working. Let's get out of here.
Starting to hallucinate down there. Yeah.
3 days we were in there.
Well, thank you for doing that.
That was like one of the first things I did for this company, believe it or not.
Yeah, that sounds like it's a high pressure situation and a difficult.
But we got it done, though. We got it done.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Company's impact and contributions. In what ways has the company positively impacted communities we serve, locally or globally, that you can think of?
That would have been my first trip to Haiti. We sold a couple of hydraulic turbine pumps down there. And what the purpose of the pumps was to pull water out of a lagoon. There was a river with a lagoon there. So the pumps pulled water out of the lagoon, and they pumped it down this like ditch to this village that was a couple of hundred yards away. And they had built a big a big concrete cistern. Yeah. So the theory was you pump the water down there and you fill the cistern up, and they don't have to walk all the way down to the lagoon to get water anymore. So there was probably 150 people in the village, and they were all around me and the drive units. And I remember when I first got there, I go walking up to the pumps, and the lagoon is right here. So I look over, and I see a bunch of people doing laundry in the lagoon, pretty much beating them on rocks. And then I see a bunch of people taking baths in the lagoon. And it finally dawned on me, all the people taking baths, they were all naked. We're talking men, women, children of all ages. My brain couldn't process that, but to them was nothing. It was like an everyday thing. So I'm working on the pump, and I'm trying to focus on what I'm doing, but I keep doing this.
100 naked people next to me.
How am I supposed? Yeah, big distraction. I wasn't even married yet either. I was still single. So anyway, I managed to compose myself and get everything done. As soon as the pump started up, see, most of the people there didn't realize what the pump was there for. They didn't make a connection between the pump and the water. But as soon as I fired up the first pump and they saw the water come out and start running down the ditch, they all started screaming and carrying on and singing and dancing. And I got all three of them going. And we all kind of followed the water down the ditch. And these guys are all singing and dancing the whole way down. Yeah, it was neat.
Yeah.
And the water finally got to the cistern, and it started filling it up. And these people just went crazy. It was like Mardi Gras, New Year's Eve, all combined. And I started thinking to myself, it was very humbling because they're this excited over some river water that they don't have to walk 300 yards to get anymore. It was a very humbling experience.
You can take it for granted, but water is life, and moving water is alive. So yeah, a lot of the places we go and do business, it definitely is life-changing to see how it impacts.
Yeah, what do we have to complain about, right?
We wake up in the morning, there's a thunderstorm outside, we just assume that our drainage systems are going to work, and how they work, people don't put much thought into it, or how food is grown, or, we turn on a faucet and just expect water to come out. But when people don't have that, and you see them get it for the first time, it's wow.
Yeah, it was a big deal to them.
Question, how do you think the industry has changed since you started, and how do you see MWI Pumps continuing to innovate and lead in the future?
Well, when I first started out, if you had an automated pump station that was working off of floats, you're talking the mid-'80s, nobody had a computer, there were no telemetry systems, there was no SCADA. They didn't have any of that stuff. Nowadays, I go out to a pump station, there's a guy sitting in his pickup truck running the entire pump station off of his cell phone. So that's a huge difference right there.
Yeah, definitely the amount of control sophistication that now can be just packaged in a simple control panel. Where before, as I was talking to Ed the other day, when one of the things he was doing when he first came to work for us was these huge control panels like South Florida Water Management, where we'd have to do all the schematics and wiring and all that. Now you can do most of that in the palm of your hand with just a simple control panel.
First time I saw a guy run a pump station off of his cell phone, I was amazed. That was probably 6 or 7 years ago, something like that.
Yeah. Now we can pull up even the pumps in our rental fleet and turn them on and off remotely and see the oil pressures and the engine temperatures, read the ECU.
You go from a float to something like that. It's pretty amazing.
Dramatic change. Closing thoughts. Any other stories or things you'd like to share about your journey with MWI Pumps? Things that you think would you want to pass on or put on the record?
Well, I remember again when I was first starting out, the old timers, as I used to call them, were Jose Robinson, Dennis Whitaker, and Chuck Greason. I don't know if you remember Chuck.
I don't remember Chuck.
He might have been, you were pretty young back then, but these were the old timers, Jose Robinson and Dennis Whitaker specifically. If I was at a job site and I was having trouble with a line shaft, I had a question, I could call Dennis, he'd help me out. I would call Jose. If it was a hydroflow issue, he would help me out. But now all those guys are long gone, and it suddenly dawned on me, now I'm the old timer. Yeah. Last year I was at a startup. We had pumps installed there back in the late 80s, hydroflows. And they had bought new pumps. And last year was the startup of the new pumps that replaced all the old ones that I did startup on back in the late 80s. And I remember the chief pump station operator, we started talking. I did startup on the original pumps before he was even born.
You passed that knowledge and information on to him?
I told him that, yeah. It was just got a big chuckle out of everybody. But
yeah, how unusual is that for people to be able to pass on that?
That's happening quite a bit. I'm running into people who are been at their jobs for 15, 20 years, and they weren't even born when I got into it. So
that's something special. Talking about Jose, I remember, he kept all of his notes for probably the plumbing stuff and other things on every single pump he did in his little black book. You still have that black book, I'm sure, somewhere, and all of his notes for all those early pumps that he did. Because he was the one keeping the record to how he put the stuff together.
He had them on little recipe cards and a little folder. And literally recipe cards, what was in the pumps.
Yep, I remember working with him for a few summers, having the opportunity to learn how to assemble our hydroflows and stuff, climbing up inside of them and everything like that. It's a fun experience. I'm sure you were working with me at the same time when I
remember you on the shop floor. I remember that. Yep.
Memories. Well, as I've been asking everybody, one of the things we're wanting to do is capture a bunch of different people, saying happy birthday or happy 100-year celebration to MWI Pumps as we approach it for next year. And we're going to try to clip all these together and figure out how to use all of these stories that we're getting to pass on to the next generation. So if you want to look at the camera and say anything to the company or, happy birthday.
Sure. Happy birthday, MWI. It's quite an amazing feat to be in business for 100 years. And I'm sure we'll do another 100. I don't know if I'll be around for the next one, the bicentennial, I guess.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll start making heart pumps.
Yeah. So anyway, congratulations. It's quite a feat.
Thank you very much, Mike, for all your input and contribution to the business.
Thank you.